What would you do if a single, unscripted moment set the internet on fire? That's exactly what happened with Barron Trump. One gesture, one glance, and suddenly, millions couldn't stop talking. But it wasn't just Barron in the spotlight. It was his mother, Melania, whose reaction left everyone guessing. Before we get into this, welcome to the channel. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love connecting with you all. And if you enjoy stories that go beyond the headlines, take a second to like this video and subscribe. Trust me, you'll want to stay tuned for this one. Here's the scene. It was a public event, one of those moments where every move is magnified by the cameras. Barron, now taller than his father and looking more grown up than ever, stood beside Melania. He wasn't saying much, he never does, but his presence alone had people watching. And then it happened. A small movement, barely noticeable to the untrained eye. But for those watching closely, it was enough to spark a frenzy. Barron shifted, glanced at Melania, and in that brief exchange, something passed between them. Melania's expression changed, ever so slightly. Was it a flash of pride? A moment of motherly concern? Or something deeper, harder to define? Whatever it was real, unscripted, and raw in a way that caught people off guard. Social media lit up instantly. Hashtags trended, theories exploded, and the footage was replayed again and again. Some called it a rare glimpse into their bond. Others saw it as a reminder of the pressures this family faces every time they step into the public eye. But what really captured everyone's attention was Barron himself. For years, he's been a figure of mystery, always in the background, never seeking the spotlight. Yet in this moment, it was impossible to look away. His calmness, his quiet confidence, seemed to speak louder than any words could. The questions started pouring in. What was the context behind that exchange? Was this a simple moment between a mother and her son, or did it reveal something we hadn't seen before? And why did it resonate so deeply with millions of people around the world? We're about to break it all down, the moment that started it, the reactions that followed, and why this particular exchange has everyone talking. It's hard to imagine what it's like growing up under constant public scrutiny. From the moment Barron Trump was born, his life was mapped out in front of cameras and headlines. But unlike many others who've grown up in the spotlight, he's remained an enigma, rarely seen, almost never heard. That's not by accident. Melania has always been clear about one thing: protecting her son's privacy. While others in the family navigated the chaos of political life and the relentless media cycle, she made sure Barron stayed out of it as much as possible. When he did appear, it was brief, walking off a plane, attending a public event, standing beside his parents. No speeches, no statements, just quiet presence. But that silence has only made moments like this one stand out even more. Because when Barron Trump steps into the frame, the world pays attention. And this time, it wasn't just his height or his composure that caught people's eyes. It was the way he and Melania interacted, a moment so subtle, so brief, yet somehow impossible to ignore. Think about it. For years, we've seen glimpses of their dynamic. The way she gently places a hand on his shoulder, the way he walks a step behind her as if by instinct. But in this viral moment, something felt different. It wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't polished. It was real. As the footage replayed across social media, people started to ask questions. What does this mean? Is Barron stepping into a new chapter of his life? And most importantly, what was Melania thinking in that split second when her expression shifted? What we do know is that Melania's protective nature hasn't wavered. Even now, as Barron grows older and taller, literally standing above those around him, she remains the anchor by his side. This moment, though, has sparked a new level of curiosity about their relationship and how it's shaped Barron into the young man we see today. So why did this moment resonate so deeply? It's not just about what happened, it's about what it represents. For years, the world has seen Barron as the quiet son of a very public family. But this time, it feels like we're watching a shift, a glimpse of someone stepping into their own, even if just for a second. What's fascinating isn't just the moment itself, but the reaction it sparked. People aren't just talking about what they saw, they're reflecting on what it means to grow up under such intense scrutiny and how those around you, like Melania, shape that journey. And that's why this story matters. It's not just about a viral clip or a trending hashtag. It's about the bond between a mother and her son, the weight of growing up in the public eye, and the questions it raises about privacy, family, and identity. The event was a campaign rally, one of those larger-than-life gatherings where the energy in the room feels almost electric. The crowd was a mix of loyal supporters and curious onlookers, packed shoulder to shoulder, waving signs and chanting slogans. Barron stood quietly at the side, taller than anyone around him, his presence subtle yet impossible to ignore. The cameras were everywhere, capturing every handshake, every smile. The stage was set for another meticulously planned appearance, but what happened next wasn't on anyone's script. As the speeches carried on and the atmosphere grew louder, there was an unspoken anticipation in the air. It wasn't clear what people were waiting for, but the room seemed to hold its breath. And then Barron moved. It wasn't dramatic, just a simple step forward. Yet, it was enough to shift the entire focus of the room. The murmurs started immediately, growing louder as people realized what was happening. Melania, standing nearby, turned her head slightly toward him. Her face didn't give much away, but her eyes seemed to follow his every move. Was it surprise? Concern? Or something else entirely? The audience couldn't tell, but they could feel it. Something was happening, and everyone wanted to know what it meant. Barron walked onto the stage, his expression calm, his posture composed. For a moment, it seemed as though the world had gone silent. The usual chaos of a rally with cheers, applause, shouts, faded into a strange kind of quiet. All eyes were on him. What was he doing? Was this planned, or had he decided to step into the spotlight on his own? The questions came fast, but the answers weren't immediately clear. And then, just as quickly as he had stepped forward, he paused. He didn't speak, didn't gesture, just stood there for a moment that felt longer than it probably was. The crowd, unsure of how to react, seemed caught between awe and confusion. Meanwhile, Melania's expression changed again, subtly but noticeably. Her lips pressed together in a way that suggested she was holding back a reaction, her gaze steady but filled with something hard to describe. This wasn't just about Barron being on stage. It was about the way he carried himself, the way he seemed unfazed by the attention. It was about the quiet strength in his presence, the kind that doesn't demand attention but still holds it. As the crowd slowly started to react, with claps and cheers breaking the silence, one question lingered in the air: why now? Why this moment? The answer wasn't immediately clear, but one thing was certain: this wasn't just another appearance. It felt like the beginning of something, a new chapter, perhaps, or a glimpse of what's to come. Barron's return to his place beside Melania wasn't dramatic. He didn't glance back at the audience, didn't seek validation from the thousands watching him. Instead, he stood quietly, exuding the kind of calm that seemed almost unusual for someone in his position. For a teenager, it was a moment that showed remarkable self-assurance, the kind that can't be faked. Melania, standing slightly behind him, didn't take her eyes off him for a moment. The usual mask she wore at public events, a carefully controlled expression that gave away nothing, cracked just enough to reveal what she was truly feeling. Pride? Certainly. But there was something else, too. A kind of bittersweet realization that her son, once just a child clinging to her hand, was no longer the boy she had fiercely protected. He was growing into something more. The crowd had been loud just moments before, cheering and waving signs. Now, there was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere. People weren't just watching, they were engaged. A few murmured softly, as though trying to make sense of what they'd just witnessed. Others stood still, their expressions contemplative. Even those who had been distracted earlier were now paying attention. For years, Barron had been a figure shrouded in mystery. Unlike his siblings, who were accustomed to the spotlight and often leaned into it, he had remained a quiet presence, only appearing when absolutely necessary. This was different. This wasn't a simple photo op or a scripted family moment. This was Barron stepping forward, seemingly on his own terms. But what was it about his speech that left such an impression? It wasn't long or filled with lofty promises. He hadn't tried to mimic the tone of his father or deliver a polished, rehearsed message. Instead, he spoke simply and directly, his words chosen carefully, almost thoughtfully. The crowd responded not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. It's rare to see someone so young carry themselves with such composure, especially in front of a crowd of thousands. Barron didn't fidget or falter. He didn't try to fill the silence with unnecessary words. He simply stood there, fully present, letting his message sink in. As the energy in the room began to rise again, Melania's posture shifted slightly. She stood taller, her expression more confident, as though reassured by what she had just witnessed. For her, this moment was as much about her as it was about Barron. She had spent years shielding him from the harsh glare of public life, and now, for the first time, she was watching him navigate it on his own. The crowd began to cheer again, this time with more enthusiasm. What had started as polite applause turned into a wave of support that swept across the room. People clapped, some even standing, while others called out words of encouragement. The noise grew louder, filling the space with a kind of warmth that felt unexpected in such a large gathering. Online, the reaction was immediate. Social media platforms lit up with posts and videos, each one offering a different perspective on what had just happened. Barron Trump speaks out, one caption read, accompanied by a video clip that had already been viewed thousands of times. The quiet Trump makes his mark, another user commented. But amidst all the attention, one thing stood out, the overwhelming focus on his authenticity. People weren't just talking about the content of his speech, they were talking about the way he had carried himself, the quiet confidence he had exuded, and the unmistakable bond he shared with his mother. Melania's role in all of this didn't go unnoticed. In fact, many online commenters pointed out the way she had watched him, the subtle gestures that showed her support without overshadowing him. She looked so proud, one tweet read. You can tell how much she's worked to protect him all these years. As the rally continued, it became clear that this moment wasn't just a highlight of the evening, it was the highlight. Conversations buzzed through the crowd, with people speculating about what this could mean for Barron's future. Was this the start of a more public role for him? Or was it simply a one-time appearance that had captured the world's attention? Whatever the answer, one thing was clear, this was a moment that wouldn't be forgotten anytime soon. For those in the room, it felt like they had witnessed something rare, a glimpse of the person behind the name, the human side of a family often seen as larger than life. And for Melania, it was a moment of transition. She had spent years keeping Barron out of the spotlight, fiercely guarding his privacy and ensuring that he could grow up away from the pressures of public life. Now, she was watching him step into it, not because he had to, but because he chose to. As the event wound down, people lingered in their seats, reluctant to leave. The usual energy of a rally, fast-paced and chaotic, had been replaced by something quieter, more reflective. People weren't just leaving with campaign flyers and merchandise. They were leaving with a story, a moment they would tell others about. For Barron, this was just the beginning. The attention his speech garnered wasn't just about the words he said, it was about the questions it raised. Who is Barron Trump? What role will he play in the future? And most importantly, how will he navigate the world that has watched him from the sidelines for so long? As the night came to a close, Melania placed a hand on Barron's shoulder, guiding him gently off the stage. It was a small gesture, but it spoke volumes. It was her way of reminding him, and perhaps herself, that no matter how much changes, some things will always remain the same. As the rally ended, the world outside the event erupted into conversation. On every platform, from news sites to social media, people couldn't stop talking about Barron Trump's speech. Not because it was grand or dramatic, but because it felt so unexpected, and in its simplicity, it carried a surprising weight. The reactions online ranged from heartfelt to speculative. Some were quick to admire his composure. He speaks with a calm maturity beyond his years, one user noted, sharing a clip of Barron addressing the audience. Another comment read, "This is the first time we've truly seen him, not as a public figure, but as a person." But the reactions didn't stop at Barron. Much of the discussion focused on Melania, her visible emotions during the moment and the way she handled herself. "She looked like she was holding back tears," someone tweeted. "You can tell this was a big moment for her, not just him." Others debated the subtleties of her expressions. Was it pride? Was there a hint of nervousness? Some even suggested it was bittersweet, a realization that her son was no longer the child she had spent years protecting, but someone stepping into his own identity. Then there was the broader conversation about what this meant for the Trump family. Some felt the moment humanized them in a way few expected. For a family known for their larger-than-life personalities, this quiet moment from Barron and Melania stands out, a journalist noted in their analysis. Still, not everyone agreed. A few skeptics questioned whether this was a calculated move, an attempt to shift the narrative surrounding the family. "Is this Barron's introduction to public life?" one headline asked. Another suggested, "The quiet Trump finally speaks. What does it mean for the family's future?" What made the moment resonate wasn't just the public discussion. It was how personal it felt. Parents watching at home commented on how they related to Melania's reaction. "I see myself in her," one person wrote. "Letting your child step forward is such a mix of pride and vulnerability." Teenagers, meanwhile, saw something of themselves in Barron, someone navigating a moment that could easily have overwhelmed him but didn't. "He's just like us, but under so much more pressure," one young commenter wrote. This wasn't just a story about a speech. It was about the emotions it sparked, the pride, the curiosity, the questions about what comes next. As the hours passed, the discussion only deepened. Analysts on TV debated what this might mean for Barron's future. Would he take on a more public role? Or would he return to the quiet life he's maintained so far? For Melania, the moment seemed to solidify her role as both a mother and a protector. She had always been known for her reserved nature, but in this moment, her emotions spoke louder than any words could. Her gestures, her expressions, they told a story of their own, one that resonated with millions of people watching around the world. And then there were the lingering questions. Was this a turning point for Barron? Did this moment signal a new chapter, not just for him, but for the entire family? And why did it resonate so deeply with so many people from so many different walks of life? What's clear is that this wasn't just about what happened on stage. It was about what it represented, the universal experience of stepping into a new role, of growing up, of letting go and moving forward. As we reflect on this moment, it's hard not to wonder, what will the world remember about this night? Will it be the speech, the reactions, or the questions it left unanswered? As the dust settled from the whirlwind of reactions, one thing became clear: Barron Trump's moment on stage was more than just a speech. It was a glimpse of someone stepping into their own, offering a quiet but profound reminder that growth happens in ways we often don't expect. For years, Barron has been seen as the quiet member of a family constantly in the spotlight. But this moment showed that being quiet doesn't mean being absent. His composure, his ability to stand before a crowd without wavering, and his authenticity resonated with people across generations. It wasn't about perfection, it was about presence. And then there's Melania. As the camera lingered on her that night, you could almost see the story unfolding in her expression. She has spent so many years standing just behind Barron, shielding him from the harsh glare of the public eye. This time, though, she wasn't shielding, she was supporting. It was a quiet acknowledgement that her son was ready to take a step forward, and she trusted him to handle it. Her belief in Barron has always been evident, even if understated. And in that moment, it was more than belief, it was pride. Pride in his ability to navigate something so overwhelming with a grace that's hard to teach. But what does this moment mean for Barron's future? That's the question everyone seems to be asking. Will this be a turning point for him? Will we see more of him in public life, or will he return to the privacy he's maintained so far? Only time will tell. What's undeniable, though, is the impact of this one moment. It's a reminder of the power of quiet strength, of authenticity in a world that so often feels performative. And for Melania, it's a testament to her role as a mother, someone who doesn't just protect but also empowers, who knows when to step in and when to step back. Now, I want to hear from you. What do you think this moment signifies for Barron? Do you see it as a glimpse into his future or a one-time occurrence? And what stood out to you most about Melania's role in all of this? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your perspective. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more content like this, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support means everything, and it helps us continue bringing you stories that matter. Thank you for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.